Listen Up a Minute. I am your host, John Dowl. So good to be with you again. And as always, want to thank our video host, if you will, Audrey Hall. Without her, we'd be talking to ourselves and not you all. And the folks at LJ Brown Productions who make this thing happen, and Dereck Wright of Full Motion Videos who put this together. Thank you all so very much for what you do and for making this possible. And I have with me Mr. Dereck Dean from KC, Kansas City, Missouri. As my former college professor would say, if you're from Missouri, you say Missouri. But I'm from Virginia, so I'll say Missouri. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. Thanks for joining us.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a native of Kansas City, Missouri, and I have been a clinical social worker for the past 4 years. So I'm dually licensed, and I love working with kids and families. Love therapy. I think it's one of the best things that anyone could do for themselves. So yeah.
So you're a licensed clinical social worker, which means you have a master's in social work as well.
Correct.
So that, I guess that's a requirement to become a licensed clinical social worker?
Yes, you have to have your master's in social work, and then you have to pass the test to become a licensed social worker, then another test to become a clinically licensed social worker.
Okay. What's the difference between you and an unlicensed? If I say I'm John Dowl, an unlicensed therapist working for such and such and such.
That would be what it basically tells people. If a person is, you can do social work without being a social worker. I'm a social worker, so which means that I'm licensed to do what I do. And I think that's the biggest thing. People that are unlicensed, they can mean well and may have a good set of basic skills, but I think going through the test, going through school, being able to practice and kind of hone those skills is the biggest difference.
Oh, so I guess if someone says they're unlicensed, should maybe, I don't know, a orange flag or maybe a hot pink flag go up, if you will?
Depending on what you're seeing that person for, that could possibly be something, because social workers, we're so versatile. We work in a variety of settings, from hospice to prenatal care, White House to drug rehab. I mean, we're literally everywhere. So sometimes just your background in social work may be sufficient to do the job that you're doing. But when you start getting into therapy and other kind of more specialized areas, licensed professional is kind of what you want to go for.
Go ahead.
I was going to say kind of the difference between being able to play basketball and being a basketball player. There's going to be quite a bit of difference between me and Shaquille O'Neal. Just a different skill set. Years of practice. It's kind of the same difference.
Okay. You mentioned the different, how varied you all are, and Harry Edwards comes to mind, the sociologist, and I'm thinking that he still may be a consultant with the 49ers. I don't know if the name rings well. We were talking before, and you said you really don't follow sports, but I remember seeing him on some different panels, years past. And then one Sunday, I'm watching the 49ers game, and they're showing a sideline. I'm like, that's Harry Edwards. Harry Edwards on the sideline with the 49ers, and listening to him, I thought he was a psychologist. He's a sociologist. So if you could tell me and some other viewers out there, how closely do you all work with psychologists, if you do, and some of the differences?
Sure. So social workers work, depending on the setting, can work very closely with psychologists, psychiatrists, other practicing professionals. The biggest difference when you get into psychology, you're talking about the ability to be able to test, do psychological testing. So for example, if you wanted testing for autism spectrum, if you wanted testing for ADHD, for intellectual functioning, a social worker would not do that. That's not our level of specialty. Testing is its own beast. How to interpret data, how to read the data, where do they fall on the scale. Inversely, where like a psychiatrist, their specialty is prescribing medicine. So if I am bipolar, what can I take that will be able to even out my moods? If I have schizophrenia, should I take an injectable? Should I take a pill? You know, what do you think is best? And if a certain type of medication doesn't work, then what else can I take? So a lot of times social workers, especially clinical social workers, will know a lot about medications and injectables and other different things just because of our affiliation with our work colleagues.
Okay. Where'd you go to school?
I went to school for my undergrad. I went to Lincoln University in Jefferson City. And then I went to K-State, and then I got my second master's from UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City, in social work.
What was your first master's in?
My first master's is in education.
Okay. How does that help you with social work, or how does one help with the social work and education?
I think it plays a big part because it helps you to understand how people learn, helps you to understand, and I think it also just keeps you in touch with people. Education, how does the mind work? How do people learn? And then a lot of times with education, you have a focus, you have an interest, maybe history, art, whatever. So I think it really helps me because I think, again, it helps me to understand how people learn. What can I do to help them understand? Okay. And then with social work and learning, almost every school in the nation now has a social worker in their schools or some type of affiliation. Yes. Versus when I was in school, there was no school social worker.
The school nurse, and that was it.
That was it. I had no idea what a school social worker was. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I'm not even old, and I don't have an idea what it was. So
You said you wanted to talk about anger, I guess different types of anger, what causes people to be angry. Is anger ever justified? The whole nine. So I'm just going to let you run with it. You did say you work with all different agents and you wanted to talk about this across the board, if you will. And why is that important?
I think for one thing now, because especially in our society, especially with social media, we see so many different, we're exposed to so much violence. Anger is just as common as breathing now. And now because of so many, again, social outlets, we see people doing various things. We've seen abuse to children. We've seen abuse to elderly people. We've seen crime. We've seen homicides. So now more than ever, our society, our nation is exposed to violence, anger, and angry expressions. And I think now we get to the point now where everything's just blended together. And we've basically been, we are just basically numb to it. Everything just kind of runs together. So murder, homicide, child abuse, elder abuse, well, they were just angry. And that's not really the right way to look at anger, in my opinion.
You mentioned how everything's blended in, and I thought of the movie Angry Birds. Now, someone may say, well, that's no big deal. But when you talk about the video game, oh my gosh, the one that was popular years ago where the guy's just driving through the city, killing people.
Grand Theft Auto.
Man, one of my friends told me about that years ago, and I played it a while back, and I'm like, this is kind of fun, just you're going doing all this crazy stuff, but I was in my 30s, so I knew better. I know that this is a game, and this type of behavior in real life is totally unacceptable. And that once the game is over, that's it. I certainly wasn't going to go out and try to act that out. And I did not slam the computer down and throw the controller against the wall and, that sort of thing. But how you're saying that it's all blended in now. So I'm wondering how many of us don't know when to turn it off or how to distinguish reality from fantasy.
Yeah, and I think for many of us, the game never ends. And that becomes the issue. The game never ends. So what I do in this fantasy world becomes what I do in real life. And again, the way that many times that we're exposed to, especially violence, it seems like violence does not have a consequence. When I watch a movie, the movie goes off, somebody's dead, whatever. It doesn't seem to be a real tangible consequence. And sometimes, again, we start taking what is fantasy, what is entertainment, and that comes into our real life. And then now, too, we are a generation of just poor impulse control. Just, you see so many people today that just have so little patience. They have so little tolerance for distress. The least little thing and we pop off. And that's where we really run into a problem because, again, life is not set up that way. You can make one choice that will forever change the course of your life. And some choices cannot be easily lived out.
Is there ever a time to be angry?
Of course. Anger is not the issue. The issue is the expression.
Okay.
So I can be angry. It's my expression. It's one thing if I'm angry and I sit down and let's say I wait a day or two, collect myself, decipher between what is it that I really want to get across and have a conversation. For example, what I often ask people is, do you want to be heard or do you want to be felt?
Okay. Okay.
Do you want the person that's receiving this to know how pissed off you are? Or do you want to facilitate something that equals change? Because those are two very different paths, very, very different. So if I want you to know that I'm really angry, then whatever I say or do is fine. Because the point is to hurt, to inflict. I want you to see my emotion.
Okay.
However, if I'm trying to be heard, then I'm going to have to package myself totally different. And I can have the same expression. I can still have the same emotion and have a different expression. And then as you become a little bit more emotionally intelligent, sometimes you'll find out anger is not really anger. Sometimes anger really is disappointment.
Okay.
Sometimes anger is really feeling disrespected. Sometimes anger really is feeling unheard. But because we've never developed a skill set to express that. So then when we become adults, we just become bigger versions of kids.
Do you think that's some of what's happening with social media?
Oh, yes, definitely. Because again, people on social media, I can paint myself to be whatever I want myself to be.
Okay.
So I can present to you a picture that looks perfectly real. And again, because many of us have trouble distinguishing between what is social media and what is real life, again, we're taking on the behavior of other people. We want to pop off like other people. For example, Medea is very funny in a film.
Yes.
You cannot live real life that way.
No. Some
cannot.
people probably wish they could, however.
Right, we may wish we could, but the reality is we cannot. And that's where I think we're seeing the issue. Sometimes what is entertainment, what is fantasy, we're trying to do it in real life and we wonder why it doesn't work. Relationships don't work that way.
Yeah. You know, the social media thing, and you said we become bigger kids. How many people have you heard about getting into an argument with someone a miles away? You know, you and I in two different times. So we're going to beef with each other over the computer instead of one person just shutting it down or moving on to something else. We're going to go back and forth over the computer. And a lot of times it may be over nothing. Absolutely nothing. Politics is one thing because we can have some say-so in the outcome. Politics. But sports, I'm pretty sure you've been around plenty of guys arguing about sports. And I've done it. I've done talk shows, sports shows. But we can't change the outcome of that game. On Monday, we can't change the outcome of Sunday's game.
Exactly.
On Monday before at 7 o'clock, we aren't going to have any influence on the Monday night game. But we talk, we argue, we fuss, we get our blood pressure up like we have some skin in the game other than some bets.
Exactly.
We have bragging rights.
Yep.
And it's like, well, I got to bet on my team, although my team has a very good chance to lose. Well, I got to bet on my team because that's my team and so forth and so on. And like you said, it becomes emotional a lot of times more so than anger.
Yes, definitely. But I definitely believe there are times when we should legitimately be angry and outraged. Again, when you look at George Floyd, we should have been angry. We should have been. Now, does that mean tear up the city?
Right.
Does that mean go to your neighbor's house that happens to be white and you brick their house? Does that mean beat up someone? No. That expression is not okay, and it's not approved. It's not sanctioned. And if caught, you will get a penalty.
Right.
Again, but I can still have the emotion. I can still feel that. But again, it's how I express it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe the other kind of sidebar issue here is too, I think we need to be very careful and very mindful about what we're exposing our psyches to. A lot of this stuff is very traumatic, very traumatic. You know, it's the George Floyd thing I watched at one time. That was it. And I don't even think I watched the full video the first time. To see life leaving someone. And I don't care if the police officer was black, white, regardless of the police officer. The mere fact of watching someone die is a traumatic event.
Yes.
And when you keep exposing yourself to that over and over and over, you have all these traumas, in addition to the fear that it engenders because we are men of color. In addition to what our communities, many of us don't live in what we call good neighborhoods, then what? So then you have all this pent up anger, all this pent up rage, and it's just looking for an outlet, and anything will do.
Go back a few years ago to the other town in Missouri, and people were protesting, and this young man walks out in front of the police, defying the police, protesting, and his mother comes up and she whacks him upside the head a couple times. You can get your and the reaction to that, so many people were like, John, she didn't need to do that in front of all of America and so forth. So, oh, maybe she, and then some others, well, she was trying to make her son realize that he could have lost his life. Or maybe she was upset and or afraid and disappointed and all the above, and this is how she reacted.
Right.
Your thoughts on that particular incident, and maybe the way, how she reacted?
Again, I think it kind of goes back to being triggered. I'm sure to be a woman of color, or to be anyone of color in this country, to recognize that your loved one, your child, could be potentially milliseconds away from losing their life. Milliseconds. I imagine that is extremely, extremely emotional. And as a result, I think she may have responded out of that moment, in that moment. Right. But I think that's what a lot of us do. In the moment, we respond because, again, excluding that situation, you have to have a skill set for being angry. There has to be a skill set. Yes, there needs to be a skill set. For anything you do, there needs to be a skill set. I would not take my car to the guy down the street and ask him to fix it. I would not go to my dentist and say, oh, I need braces. A general dentist does not put on braces. They have someone to specialize in doing that. If you want to have your tooth pulled, you'll have to go to a specialist for that. If you want dentures, there's a specialist for that. There's a orthodontist, there's a cosmetologist, there's sociologists. There's a skill. All of these people have a skill set that makes us pay them the additional amount. That makes us go out of our way to make sure that we benefit from their skill set. Well, life is the same way. You have to have a skill set to manage the emotions that come with life. Because if they're unmanaged, if they're unchecked, then what happens is you'll pay the penalty for it. Again, even this computer is powered by electricity, but all the electricity in the house is controlled. We don't just have electricity coursing everywhere, it's controlled. Same way. Anger is a very powerful emotion that you can't just allow to run unchecked, unfiltered, untethered, ungrounded. You have to have you have to have a skill set or something that grounds you so that I don't go off and lose my job, lose my family. Many children today are in protective custody. They've been removed from their home because their parents went off. Many kids. I've seen bruises, I've seen broken bones, I've seen swollen eyes, I've seen jaws broken because a parent lost it. So again, those are some of the penalties that you pay. And not only in terms of society, some of those emotional wounds that's left behind that, you may be the rest of your lifetime paying for that.
Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong that you pay for that loan, but the fact is, when you hurt someone that's vulnerable, that's a risk that you run.
Yeah. Yeah. I know of a person who a few years ago, we were in a seminar, he said, what would you do if you found out someone murdered your parents? Okay, and you found that person, what would you do? And half the people, oh, I want to take care of that. Well, he said, you know, I know somebody that happened to, but that person had to stop and think now. I've already lost my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do something to that person, well, they're going to lose an uncle. They're going to lose an aunt. So let me pump my brakes. Is there another way to handle this? Because I've already lost my parents. Now I may lose another uncle or aunt that's going to be even more influential than before. Exactly. You know, do you do that? You know, people say, hey man, somebody molest my little girl. Guy said, man, I hadn't seen her. Where you been? Oh man, I was locked up for a couple of years. Why? Dude was molesting my niece and I shot him in the leg.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I probably would have been better off if I killed the SOB, but blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I'm like, did anybody else know that? Oh yeah. I'm like, why'd you go to jail? You know, but like you said, that was something that he could not take back, could not undo, and he had to pay the price for that decision that he made.
Yeah, definitely.
And looking back, do you think the niece was better served with that uncle in jail? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. And because if we haven't been in that situation, it's easy to say what we would or wouldn't do.
Exactly.
But like you said, we have to have a skill set and to manage that anger and to be able to be heard and to express ourselves. If you could touch on that some, because as you know, a lot of people really want to be heard. Teens, young teenagers, whatever. And they have no outlet. Now, outside of social media, which a lot of times might not be the best outlet, but it's
right. I think one of the key things I would say about that is timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you approach even the right way at the wrong time, you can still be pretty ineffective. Allow for some space. There has to be space between sometime you and the event. If it's too fresh, if you're too passionate about it, you may need to kind of gather yourself before you're able to move on. You know, you may need to kind of, allow for some space. Just allow for some space. And then being sure you're packaging what it is, being sure that you're being able to clearly articulate what is it that I'm trying to say?
Okay. What
is it? Did I feel disrespected? Did I feel unheard? Did I feel dismissed? And how do you convey that to the person that you're talking to?
Mm-hmm.
How do you convey that? Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that I would say is too, and this is probably the most difficult thing that I would say, sometimes you have to learn to divorce yourself from the outcome.
Okay.
I cannot be responsible for how you respond.
Mm-hmm.
The only part I can control is how I deliver the message.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. I have to release. I know I did my part. However you respond, that's just how you respond. And many times I think it's more difficult for us because we want control. I want you to say a certain, I want you to apologize. I can't make you apologize.
Okay.
I can't make you feel sorry. I can just tell you what my experience was. I can draw some healthy boundaries about it. That doesn't mean that I put myself in a position to be abusive.
Okay.
But I cannot control your response. And if control is what I want, you'll find yourself more often than not being.
Okay. Okay. Now, does that apply to, let's say, if I know you have a bad temper or some things will set you off, should I just, well, listen, I shouldn't even go there with Dereck. Or if I do, let me pull him to the side and say, hey, man, this, some, as opposed to, well, I know this is going to get a rise out of him. Let's just see.
There you go. I think wisdom is, you can never go wrong using wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You can never. So if you know that I have a high temper, then why put me in a situation where you know I'm going to be triggered by that? If something is said to me publicly, more than likely I'm going to go off if I already have a bad temper. So it's always wisdom to get a setting that's neutral. Get a setting where the other person doesn't feel put on blast.
Mm-hmm.
I call it being on the shame show. Nobody wants to be on the shame show. So it never hurts to go with that. To use wisdom, and again, be mindful about what you're saying. The words that we use are so extremely powerful. So
but what if I, as an adult, I don't know what to say?
Then that may be the time for you to get around some other kind of emotionally in tune, emotionally intelligent people, and kind of get some feedback. Get some feedback. Get some feedback.
So I need to grow, but I probably need to hang around some people that's going to help me grow.
There you go. Most musicians that I know of, don't just wake up and start playing a song. They practice it.
Right.
The Chiefs, the Royals, I don't care what team you pick, they have a practice. They don't just go out and start playing random. They practice. It's the same thing. If I know I'm angry, if I know I have something that I want to bring to you, then why not practice it?
Okay.
Get a friend. Hey, man, this is what happened. This is what I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And get an objective opinion and say, whoa, don't say that. No, don't say that. That ain't got nothing to do with the situation. His mama wearing bifocals ain't got nothing to do with you being mad. You bringing something totally different. Because when you're angry, all that stuff makes sense.
Yeah.
All of it sounds good. I should talk about your mama. I should talk about whatever, because I'm mad. You need a sounding board to tell you, no, that may not be the best idea. That'd be the best idea.
Folks, that's Dereck Dean. I am John Dowl, and this is Listen Up a Minute. We're about to wrap up. Dereck, tell us the organization you work for and some of the things you all do.
I work for an organization called PACES. We work with children and adolescents and families. We do outpatient therapy as well as school-based therapy, helping families recover from trauma, displacement, any number of ills that life can bring, giving them the skills and the tools they need to be able to move ahead without our help. That's the whole purpose of therapy, for you to function without our help, without our interventions. So we teach those skills, we model those skills, and hopefully send those families on their way, and hopefully a much healthier way.
Nice. So the goal is to get them to not need you.
Yes. Yes. We don't want any families dependent on an agency. The goal is to get you to function in a healthy way, independent of our intervention.
Nice. Nice. And if someone thinks they may need help, or say if you do, or if you see A, B, or C, or 1, 2, and 3, you may need to go and get some counseling. I may not, let's say I may need counseling, but I might not realize it.
I think a good way to look at that is to look at how your own life is going. Are you satisfied with the quality of your relationships? Are you often upset? Are you often outraged? Are you often insulted? Then that may be an indication that something is going on. Just like indigestion. You shouldn't have indigestion every day. You shouldn't have pain every day. Okay. If you do, that's an indication that I probably need to seek medical help, because my body should not hurt every day. Likewise, if you're in emotional pain or distress every day or more than often, you probably need to go get some.
Got it. Hey, Dereck Dean, this has been very enjoyable. Thank you again. Continued success, and keep up the good work and getting those families healthy and keeping them healthy. You're making the world a better place, one family at a time, and we appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
For Dereck Dean, I am John Dowl, and the whole crew for Listen Up a Minute. Thank you, and see you next time.
All right, see you.
I pledge to be the change I want to see in my community. Register and vote.
I pledge to vote in all elections, local, state, and national. Vote.
I pledge to always remember people suffered and died for the right to vote. Vote.
I pledge to always remember we, the people, have the power. Vote.
I pledge to always remember to make a change. Vote.
I pledge to remain in school until I graduate. Register and vote.
I pledge to remain a law-abiding citizen and protect my right to vote.
I pledge to always demonstrate respect for myself and others. Vote.
I pledge to get out the vote.
I took the Get Out the Vote pledge. What about you? Vote.
Take the pledge.
Take the power.